Welcome into the Michigan State Hockey Hub. This is going to be a weekend preview early this week. Some work obligations pushed this to a early Tuesday morning. Should be published around 10 a.m. on Tuesday. And we have our first ever returning guest that's not Michigan State affiliated, which makes me happy because it means I didn't chase them off. So we have Todd Milewski here. Todd, how are you doing?
Doing great, Clay. How are you?
I'm doing well. So tell us, I'm looking at your Twitter bio. It looks like you have like 4 different things that you do. So give us just a quick rundown on that.
So the main stuff is I'm a sports reporter with the Wisconsin State Journal. So
Right.
that also makes me a member of the Badger Extra team. It's our new product that is specifically Badgers focused, a subscription site that brings extra content for people who are fans of the Badgers and really want that deep dive into
Yeah.
what's going on there. And then I'm also I used to be the executive editor of USCHO.com, and now I'm still I'm a hanger on there.
Yeah.
Do some stuff behind the scenes and work occasionally during the postseason on some things there, and uh, great friends with all the people that run that site. And it's been a long time, 20 some years I've been working with them. And
Yeah.
that's just something that's fun to keep around.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So as we look ahead at this weekend series, these are 2 teams right now in Wisconsin and Michigan State that I'm not willing to say, even though I see it on Twitter. And as you know, Todd, Twitter is 100% factual at all times.
Always.
Um, I it's saying going in different directions is far too drastic, but 2 teams that, Michigan State pretty bad past several years. New coach, starting to play well, seeing improvements, which is something we haven't seen. Wisconsin, and correct me if I'm wrong, they kind of do this kind of up and down year thing more often than I would imagine they would. And they're so far this year coming in at 2-6. Spartans 4-3-1. That one, if that's confusing, you don't remember a tie. The shootout last week, in which they won the shootout, goes down as a tie. They get the extra point in the standings. This weekend series, Friday at 7 p.m., Saturday 6 p.m., both on Big Ten Plus. Todd, do you realize how big this game is? 61-4 all-time record. This is the
Yes.
game to break the all-time record.
I tracked this a couple of years ago, and I was like, wait, this is really close now. It's become almost level, and then it did become level, and now, yeah, right. So this is think of how much is riding on this, at least for a couple of months, the all-time series. Yeah, but
Yeah,
what you were talking about there before with the programs going different directions, I think that's certainly in the feel around them, right?
right.
Because the coaching change this offseason for Michigan State really reminded me of what we saw here in Madison in 2016 when Tony Granato came in. That was a program that at that point needed a refresh, needed a jolt of
Mhm.
something. And I think that was the same way Michigan State was. Obviously, the Spartans had, the renovations to Munn happening. So that was kind of already there was something going on there. We knew that was coming this season. Um, but it felt like Wisconsin in 2016 needed a jolt, and they got it. They got Tony Granato. It was a
Yeah.
name out of the NHL. It was promising that there was going to be more excitement, and the fans came along that first season. That the attendance was up, the interest was back. They almost made the NCAA tournament. They got to the championship game. They finished second in the Big Ten, got to the championship game of the Big Ten tournament, and lost in double overtime. Didn't make the NCAAs. And after that, it was really a struggle the next few years.
Yeah.
Obviously had the Big Ten championship in the COVID year, but other than those 2 seasons, it's really been like I said, a struggle. And so yeah, you do see the paths going opposite directions, at least in terms of how the perception of the program is from the outset, I think.
And I think what it all is rooted into is both have been failures, in my opinion, but in different ways. Like Michigan State failure has been like, oh man, we're going to be bad this year, and they're bad. Wisconsin's been kind of a expectations failure where
Mhm.
you have these high draft picks, you have um, players that you would say, okay, these players are going to take us. We're finally going to get over that edge. And then you look at the standings at the end of the year, and they aren't where they want to be. So yeah, it's a weird feel around both of these programs. The feel around Michigan State's program right now is simply I'm looking at a different brand of hockey. I'm looking at no more, just dump and chase, and 17 shots on goal the whole game. It's now 40 shots on goal. It's a little bit more creativity. It's different. It's refreshing. It's going to take time, as you
Mhm.
know, with college hockey building programs. It doesn't happen overnight. But I think the fan interest right now is really starting to tick up. Now it's disappointing. All this new stuff at MUN, teams playing well, attendance is still really low,
Mhm.
but that'll come with time. And I get it. I really do. Like, you're spending your hard earned money. Maybe you want to wait and see how they do, which is fine. They haven't necessarily earned that right to sell out crowds without success. So as we look into this matchup, these are just some stats that I had pulled from collegehockeynews.com. Michigan State's power play took a big dip this past weekend. It was up over 20%, now 17.1, but the penalty kill at 90%. And that's a legit, like, they've been really good. That's not they've only had a couple. Wisconsin power play 11.5%. That's very low. And the PK at 76.5. What have you seen so far from the special teams for Wisconsin?
Well, the PK was at 1.58%, and that was,
Trending in the right direction,
well,
right?
so yeah, you look at it and honestly, since that point, it has looked pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, but the problem is that it doesn't matter how it looks when you take 10 seconds off, you make the one bad read, and all of a sudden it's in your net, and boop, that's one against you. And that's what I think has been happening with Wisconsin on the penalty kill side. That there's a few minutes of relaxing or a few seconds of relaxing or not having the mind fully in it or fully invested in things, and for those four guys, and it ends up costing them. But on the power play side, they're not finding the right combinations, I don't think, of players to have on there. They've been mixing and matching a few different units, and they're not fine. And this kind of goes along with the forward lines too, that they're not really finding the steady connections, the one that what you're going to get every time comes over the boards. It's been I think a frustration for them that, and this goes back years, that
Yeah.
they've tried a lot of things on the power play and just have never found anything, with the exception of the year when they had Cole Caulfield,
Yeah.
Linus Weissbach, and Ty Pelton
They were
Bike.
like 30% or near it, right?
Yeah, and they were rolling five forwards out there on the
Yeah.
power play because they had five forwards that they could depend on, and a few of them that they could depend on to get back on D if they needed,
Yeah.
and not give up chances. But yeah, 30 some percent. Obviously, Caulfield won the Hobie that year, and um, that was a year that everything really came together for them. We thought maybe that was going to be the year before, because I got a memory of this day thing on Google a
Yeah.
few weeks ago of the first line chart of the season for the Badgers from 2019-20, and it was Caulfield, Turcotte, Keandre Miller on the back, Ty Emberson on the back, um,
Holloway.
Dylan Holloway, yeah, and so it was like that was the team we thought was going to
That
take
team's
the Big
good.
Ten, and it ended up finishing last in the Big Ten,
I
and
know, it's crazy.
it was one of those things where if you knew at the start of that season that this was a last place team in the Big Ten, you were much better than me, because I mean, looking at that amount of talent, there is no reason that should have happened. I think it was a case where a lot of people on their own pages,
Yeah.
a lot of their own agendas, and it never really came together the way that it needed to. And since then, the power play hasn't been the same. Obviously, you don't have the kind of weapons that that team did, and that's really what it comes down to, is having those special players to make special plays. Is something that they've missed over the last two seasons.
Yeah, and sometimes with that power play, it does take time, but if you can't find a rotation of unit 1, unit 2, and players clicking and getting together, and it's tough, and it's one of the most frustrating things. I believe it was the COVID year. Michigan State was like 6% or 7 or 8% on the power play. And the thing about it wasn't even because we were losing the games regardless, right? It's not we need this goal. It was this is beyond frustrating to watch because you can't it seems like you all have never played together once in your
Mhm.
life. Passes are off. It's really, really frustrating. But as we roll through some of these other stats, Michigan State 2.63 goals per game, giving up 2.63 as well. So it's going to be break even all weekend, apparently. And Wisconsin, 1.88 goals per game, giving up 2.75. I just put these two. I don't want it to look like I'm just like crapping on Wisconsin, but I saw 0-4 at home
Numbers are numbers, right?
and
Yeah.
0-3 in one score games. And I thought, oh my gosh, man, those are the areas. And I always talk about whenever I talked about Michigan State's roster coming into the season, it wasn't a let's go out and see if they can get first place in the Big Ten. It was improve on the peripherals, improve on the edges of the roster. The third line get a little bit better. Fourth line, yeah. This is what I'm talking about too. When teams are 0-3 in one score games, 0-4 at home, those are the areas that you need to find ways to win to be competitive. And it's not because I know it sounds like a cliche, but in the Big Ten for hockey, there's way too much talent to
Mhm.
be. It's tough to come back from losing your home games at this rate or losing those one score games because you need those one score games because when you play Michigan, you're not going to be in a one score game.
Chances are pretty good you're gonna need a little bit more
Yeah,
than you're getting. Yeah, and the thing that stood out to me is that, the Badgers played, Penn State last weekend, and, the Friday game ended up 2-1, for Penn State, and not for a lack of chances from Wisconsin that they
yeah,
only ended up with one goal, but the finishing was the thing. There were so many times the puck was in someone's skates, in between the circles, in the slot, and it just you know couldn't turn into a good chance, and that really has carried over through the weeks here. A couple weeks earlier, they played St. Cloud and lost the second game 2-1. It's basically the same kind of thing. Got bottled up in the middle, didn't find, were pretty predictable, I think, in terms of
yeah,
how they were going about things, and didn't really get enough uh, pucks to the net to make them, give themselves a chance for rebounds or anything like that. They just didn't get the pucks through. That was I think a big thing that's going to be it's going to be a big thing this weekend and going forward for Wisconsin is that stop looking for the perfect play.
right.
Just get the puck there and see what happens because uh, they have some players that do tend to, yeah, or at least in the first 4 weeks of the season, have tended to, pass up on maybe the first opportunity to look for something a little bit better. And I think that's going to have to start to turn a little bit. It's just okay, let it go and see what happens after that and deal with the rest.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we've been seeing from Michigan State. They've just been firing the puck. It's not it's around the level of Penn State where it's
Yeah,
just like
no
enter
one's
the
to that
zone,
point,
puck
right?
on net, enter the zone, puck on net. But this stat for Michigan State, they've always struggled in the second period the past year, year and a half, and I don't know why. I've tried to figure it out. I don't know why. In the first period of games, Michigan State's out shooting opponents by 40 or 50 shots. Third period of game, I have the stat on the screen here if you're listening on Spotify. 104 to 59 shot advantage in the third for Michigan State. In that second frame, I think it was just a difference of one or two shots, right around the same amount of shots. So um, that's what's Michigan State's shown is it can kick it in the third period, and they came back playing UMass Lowell down 0-3, kicked it in, were able to get back in that game. So yeah, getting the shots on net, that is one of those things that we had not seen here. But now that we're starting to see it, it's amazing. And it's different, in my opinion. I know a lot of people watch NHL. Getting pucks on net's always good, but I feel like in college it's even better, just because there's a different level of skill, obviously, than the NHL, and just getting confusion and chaos in front of the net oftentimes pays off.
Yeah, the goalies are always worse when they have someone in front of them. I mean, that's or when the puck moves across the middle. I mean,
Yeah,
those are just stats. And so I think when you are able to get the part of the problem is that, shot blocking has gotten so much better, and players getting in lanes has gotten so much better that getting that puck through the first time is a lot more difficult than it was, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
There are the first layer, the second layer of defense that you have to get the puck through to the net if you're talking about shooting from kind of the periphery. But
right.
yeah, working those you know those battles in the corner to get the puck to even get the puck to the front of the net too. That I think are becoming those little things that are becoming so much more important now. Uh, we don't see the the physicality of the game is still there. It's maybe just directed in a different way than it used to be, but it's so much more important winning the pucks in the corners or along boards to give yourselves a little bit more of a chance.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I wanted to briefly roll through the line chart here. Some of these names Michigan State fans will recognize. You see a lot of names with NHL teams next to it. A lot of names with draft picks here. Okay, Todd, I hate this, and this is just me griping about nothing probably. The goalies on the left-hand side of the chart instead of the right-hand side of the chart. I feel like every time I look at a line chart, it's on the right-hand side. I
Yeah,
looked down at this one this morning and I was like, "Oh my gosh, my mind hates that for some reason."
right. And I'm not sure why exactly that was that way. It always used to be on the right, and I think maybe that at one point there was a 13th forward that was put like a line below, so line below the fourth line instead of
Yeah,
that kind of matching left wing on the third line there. And so there may have been some space there and squeezed somewhere else. Yeah, I don't know. It is weird to have that there though. That doesn't
it
flow the way that our
I did
brains, I
not
think,
like
have been trained to see it, right?
my eyes looked down and saw, Kuleman's on the goalie list, and I was like, "No, no, he's their one of their best defenders." I know he's not the goalie, but yeah, so give us a few names here. Who's playing well? Who's new? Just give us the little, quick overview of the teams, players that we need to know.
Yeah, I think starting up top there, Cruz Lucius is a player that was committed to Minnesota, where his brother played last
Yeah,
season, and changed late, decommitted, and then committed to the Badgers. National team player. He's got he was a, I believe, third round pick, fourth round pick of Carolina, um, and he's a player that I think is going to. Um, Develop into a pretty dependable player down the road. Right now, he's a freshman. He's still getting that feel for the game here. We've seen some pretty good moments from him. We've seen some not so great moments from him. Same really, and with Charlie Stramel, the second line center there, he's going to be a
yeah,
first round pick. He was a grade A player in the players to watch list that came out last week, and I think he's feeling that part of his issue, and same thing with Lucius, was that both of them missed a lot of last season with the national team, and so they're still working their way back from, you know, the injuries, but also figuring out this level of hockey, and that is a process for those guys. And same thing with Stramel as with Lucius. Some really good moments, some moments where you're like that's not going to fly at this level. Jack Gorniak had a really good weekend at Duluth 2 weeks ago. A couple of goals and a bunch of assists, and it just set things up with his speed. And he's a guy that when he gets going with his speed on the wings and he gets around an edge, he'll beat a defenseman and get to the net. Now,
yeah.
can he finish at the net? That's always been the trouble for him. But he did pretty good with that a couple weeks ago. On defense, you mentioned Corson Kuhlman's a first round pick of Columbus a couple of years ago. Has gotten better from last season. Was a lot at times a real struggle for him
Yeah,
at this level. Came out of the Alberta Junior Hockey League, and that jump right from there to college was a lot for him. A lot of talent there, but it had to um, uh, it had to the talent had to kind of match with uh, the awareness, I think, that you have
Yeah.
to have at this level, that everything is moving so much faster around you.
Yeah, that speed adjustment's
Yeah,
really difficult.
totally. And Tyson Jugnoth, another defenseman, he's a freshman. He came out of the British Columbia League. He was the top defenseman there last season. He's had that same kind of first year struggle jumping from junior to college. He sat out 3 games in a row. Was it just the first few games we saw him, it just seemed like he was, he was a little tentative, and this is not a level of hockey
No.
for timid players or tentative players. You've got to be right in there, otherwise it's gonna pass you by pretty fast. And I think he's getting there. He's starting to pick it up. And I think he'll be a really good player. I just don't know what the timeline is on that one. There's a couple players missing from this line sheet. We're not really sure whether on defense Mike Vorlicki was injured 2 weeks ago at Duluth, missed last weekend. He was not practicing yesterday, so I don't know what his status is for this week. And at forward, Ty Smilanic, who transferred from Quinnipiac and is
Mhm.
the he's scored 1 goal for the Badgers, but he's with combining what he scored in 2 years at Quinnipiac. He's the leading goal scorer on this roster in college. He was out last week for personal reasons, was away from the team, and we didn't see him also yesterday. So I don't know what the status is there yet. We have our media availability with Tony Granato Tuesday afternoons, and so that's where we'll find out a little bit more about what the status is there. But yeah, that's and Jared Moe is the number one goalie. If you're getting into it right here, and yeah, if you want to take it into that,
Yeah, so I knew Jared Moe's name. Kyle McClellan, I did not know. Was he a transfer?
yeah, he transferred from Mercyhurst.
Okay, so transferring in college sports is a whole podcast for itself. It seems like there has been more and more and more each year, and it seems like every time I'm like, "All right, let me dive into this team," it's like, "Oh my gosh, they've had 34 goalies in the past 2 years, like, moving all around," and the
Mm-hmm.
same at Michigan State, right? We have,
So
Dylan St. Cyr on his 3rd college now, and,
yeah,
um, so the 2 goalies here at Wisconsin, who now Cameron Rowe, was he last year and he transferred, right,
he
to
transferred
Western?
to Western Michigan
Yeah.
as part of this whole kind of movement in the offseason.
Musical chairs, yeah.
Yes, the goalie market is going to, I think, always be pretty
Yeah.
fluid in the transfer portal, just because you don't get that many chances to recruit goalies as many as you do at other positions, and
Yeah.
so if you don't, if you miss on someone, or if you
Or a
don't have someone,
decommit.
yeah, if you don't have someone coming in the cycle that you need, when you have someone leaving, this is your option. You're probably not going to grab someone uh, you know, you know, late in the game, or you'd rather not. So you then have this option of who's out there in the transfer portal, and yeah, it does tend to shake up things an awful lot when you have this as much goalie movement as Wisconsin has in the last 8 to 10 years, really. It hasn't been a totally settled position for a long time. But I think last year and this year, it's become Jared Moe's position. I think they're really clear that he's the number one guy. McClellan is going to play. He's played once. He's going to play occasionally, but until something changes, Jared Moe is the guy that they're going to go to most times.
Yeah, so, as we look into this series and as we look ahead to the weekend, how do you see Wisconsin winning this game? Wisconsin wins if what are they gonna have to do in order to win?
Well, I think going on the history that we have, the 2 games that they've won, Wisconsin wins if they're able to play a, I don't want to say perfect game, but it's kind of has to get to that point where they don't have the stumbles that they've had. One on offense. I mean, that's the thing. They can't score 1 goal and think they're going to be winning games. That's the big one.
Yeah.
but they can't have the slip ups that they had penalty kill wise. Now they overcame that in the first game they won. They gave up 2 power play goals, but that was it. They shut everything else down and scored 4 plus an empty netter. Um, it, Power play needs to contribute. That is a big thing. They're gonna be harping on that a lot, I think, in the next week or so. Um, and I think they need to have an effort that doesn't take a few shifts off.
Okay.
That's the thing that we've seen when they don't have success. They get on a few different pages, and that's never a winning formula.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those couple things, having a really solid special teams weekend, and then having the offense start to show up in a little bit more predictable ways.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this or at least touched on it in January when you joined the show, and we said or I was talking about how when you're at this point in the season of starting the Big 10, a lot of times these teams in out of conference play rack up a couple wins, get the flow, get settled in, get their feet under them. Big 10 comes and that's the real test. And it looked like that for Michigan State against Notre Dame game 1, 0-5 loss. And it was kind of like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
last year they did okay, hit Big 10 play and it's sunk. With Wisconsin coming in at 2-6, now starting, well, they've already played 2 series in the Big 10, they're 0-4, but this is one of those moments that if it starts, if you can't scrap across and win some momentum, it can spiral out of control quickly. If you see your season's lost and you're sitting there and it's only January, it can get tough. I think that Wisconsin has talent. I think just from what I've seen, which is one game and a third period of the Penn
Mhm.
State game, this team's better than their record. They are. I don't know how much better. I guess we're gonna find out. These are the 2 teams this weekend that I would say are at the bottom of the Big 10,
Mhm.
at that tier. You know, you can list the other ones.
Right.
Wisconsin and Michigan State are in the same tier, whether we like that or not, and, so it's gonna be interesting. I'm looking forward to a bottom tier Big 10 series because I wanna know what that looks like this year with new coaching, so,
Right.
um,
The
and
and these
speak
are right, these are the ones that you would think Michigan State really has to win if it doesn't wanna be the last place team, right?
yeah,
You've gotta find the teams that you're going to, especially at home, be able to beat.
and speaking of last place teams, that leads us into our Big Ten standings, brought to you by, of course, our friends at College Hockey News, who have listed Michigan in last place, which is just a beautiful thing. Now, of course, Michigan hasn't played a Big Ten game, so they're actually sitting at, as I put the dash there, I don't want to give them 0 points. I don't want to do that because they haven't played yet, but Michigan is 7-1 at the bottom. Wisconsin right above them, 2-6. 0-4 in conference play, and that's how these work. If you're unfamiliar and you're looking at this kind of confused, it goes by points in conference play. So this is Big Ten standings. So you'll see like Penn State. Oh, Penn State is 8-0 and only has 6 points just because they've played less games in conference than Ohio State, who's the number 1 team. Notre Dame at 3rd, Minnesota at 4, Michigan State at 5. Todd, before we get you out of here, how do you predict these standings will look? Just give me a quick run through. And of course, if you're wrong, I'm going to, put this out on Twitter or a clip of
Alright.
you being wrong at the end of the year,
You're talking about by at the end of the season what the
at
standings
the
look
end of
like?
the season.
I'm sticking with what I had at the first, which was Minnesota, Michigan, Notre Dame at the top. Um, I can't remember if I had Ohio State, Penn State, and then Wisconsin, Michigan State. And now I don't know if I'm sticking with my Michigan State below Wisconsin, the way things have gone so far. And I'm maybe this week will be what
Yeah.
kind of tells us how that order might go. But you're right. These are the bottom tier, like you're talking about. There's a top tier, and I think that was Minnesota and Michigan, and maybe Notre Dame. The way that people were
Yeah. To
taking
me,
things
it's
in that order.
Minnesota, Michigan here.
Yeah,
The next tier, and they're good teams. They're top
yeah,
20 teams still. It's just, I,
and
I just don't see them in that top, S tier.
Yeah.
And that just speaks volumes about the Big Ten's talent level at this point in time. But yeah,
Right.
so when we're talking about tiers, Wisconsin, Michigan State battling it out for the not last place trophy. So,
Seems like
Todd,
it
thank
should be
you.
a physical trophy, right? Somebody should be carrying something out of Munn this week.
Yeah, that would, you know what? Maybe I'll get something. You
Yep,
know, I'm
the
sure that
buckets
they'd
or
really
whatever
appreciate.
the whatever the football team isn't using
Yeah.
anymore, the old retired, trophies for their game
I
too.
love those. Those, like, we play each other, and like Michigan State plays Indiana, and they have the brass spittoon.
Right.
Probably the dumbest thing in the world, and everyone who's like under the age of 30 is probably like,
Yeah.
what is that?
Who comes up
Um,
with these ideas, right?
yeah, it's kind of cool though. But hey, Todd, thank you so much for joining me today. Tell the people where they can find your work. I have your Twitter handle listed. I can't point, but
Yep.
right below here as well.
Yep, at Todd Milewski on Twitter, and then, Madison.com and BadgerExtra.com is, the two, sites we're working with mostly.
Now go over to Todd's Twitter, follow him. It's a good way, especially if you like Big Ten hockey. I follow all of these people that kind of follow and cover, and it's a good way just to keep tabs on things. He's not blowing up 75 tweets a day or anything. Follow him,
During
stay up.
games sometimes, but yeah, not otherwise.
Yeah, but just stay up on the other teams. You all will enjoy it. So Todd, thank you so much, and have a great week.
Thanks, you too.